wonder how she ended up with it.
Yeah, he was pretty low. He was had no choice.
Well, that's why the what do you call just like Cinda Barry shows. I think it was
how's it going? Good. I don't think any of us do.
So they should be nice and thick.
Wow, that's the problem.
Yeah, it looked like it wasn't a great job when we walked by the other morning.
Way down, it's on live stream.
Chris, you're on prayer. Right, call the City of Kenora Special Committee of the Whole meeting to order. At this time, I'd ask all rise, and Councillor Van Walleghem will read the blessing.
Our Heavenly Father, thank you for the many blessings we enjoy in the city of Kenora. As we gather, we recognize that we are on Treaty 3 lands, which are steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations and Métis people today. We continue to be thankful for the partnerships with our Indigenous people. Give us wisdom in our minds, clearness in our thinking, truth in our speaking, and always love in our hearts, so that we may try always to unite the citizens of Kenora. Be with us today and guide us in our decision making. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor. At this time, does any member of council wish to declare a pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof, pertaining to any items either on today's agenda or from a meeting at which a member was not in attendance? Seeing none, we'll move on to the purpose of the meeting, strategic plan progress update. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Kyle, who's going to give us a bit of introduction.
Sure, I am going to do the best that I can to sort of provide some introduction. Our consultant is just running behind, so I don't want to duplicate too much of what he's going to do, but the main purpose of today's meeting is to inform council on the development of the strategic plan and review the priorities and action items identified for the 2022 to 2027 period, and to ensure synergy between council staff and the community on what the community's needs and priorities are, and the conversations that we've had with staff internally. So to go back to our previous strat plan, I know as myself coming in as a newcomer and having some conversations internally as the team, there was a lot of really good intention in the previous strat plan, and we talked a lot about what we wanted to do, but we didn't necessarily go down one more step to talk about the how we were going to do it. And the previous plan was difficult to measure in a lot of ways, and difficult to sort of return to and say, okay, well, how successful were we in this aspect, or how successful were we in this aspect? So we've had a lot of conversations make this plan more measurable and easier for us to be able to come back to council and say, look, this is what we've done and this is how we've done it, and be able to show you the progress on a more regular basis, and obviously show the public our progress as well as we go. So, you know, just to revisit, and again, I'll tell Mr. Penner when he gets here that we can kind of gloss over some of these things that I've touched on, but just a review of how we've gotten here to date, okay? Phase 1 was sort of May to June of 2021. The consultant reviewed a bunch of background documents, some of the plans that we already have on the books, our previous strat plan. We sat down and we started thinking about engagement planning and how that was going to look. That was when we had the initial workshop with council. and we had staff workshops at that same time, and we put out notice to the community that we would be looking for their feedback. Again, that was May to June this year. From June to August, that's when we really kicked it into high gear with the engagement. We had a community survey. You'll get to see some data from that survey today. We had stakeholder meetings with stakeholders that had been identified by the project committee. We had engagement booths set up all over town, so at the farmers market and in different venues, so that people could also sort of, pop in. There was one at the Main Street Market as well when it was open. And at that time, our consultant Urban Systems sort of put together a summary report of sort of their initial findings. So then from September to November, we developed and we reviewed the draft plan, and sorry, I thought I heard a knock there. We started taking the initial direction and trying to sort of put it into, action items to move forward with. And we had internal staff review and workshops at that time. So the manager and supervisory group have had a number of touch points with this and have had an opportunity to provide feedback as well, which was really important. And we took that opportunity to revise our direction a little bit, and then we provided a brief update to council, as you'll recall, in November. So to use a Grey Cup metaphor for the CFL fans in the room, we are firmly in the red zone now, and we're just trying to punch it into the end zone. So from December to January, we're developing the full draft plan, which we're getting really close on. We're going to have one last review with council and staff, and the community will get an opportunity to hear today sort of the direction that we're in. And then we will finalize and submit the draft plan. And so we have pushed back the timeline just a little bit. The final draft plan will come to council on Tuesday, January 11th at Committee of the Whole for council to take a look at. And then on January 18th, we would like to pass that document and be able to start moving on some of those items for you. So I think that's really where we're at, sort of to give you a quick up to speed, and I'm happy to take any questions just as Dan gets settled here. Really just proud of the team and happy with the team. We've really, sometimes when you're in these situations, you kind of just give it to Dan and say, Dan, go give us a strategic plan. And I really wanted to just say I appreciate not just the senior leadership team, but our supervisory and managerial group, as well as all the staff that provided survey feedback. Because it was really important to us that the staff felt some ownership over this plan. And sometimes it's hard, when you're reading about infrastructure or you're reading about planning and development and you don't have a direct hand in those items, sort of, understanding where you fit in the larger picture. So we've tried really hard to get to a better place with this draft document that council will see in January to make sure that staff feels that ownership. And then there's also going to be some work that we do on the back end to try and make sure that staff gets that ownership through departmental planning, which Dan will be able to talk to when he gets to the end. Dan, you just give me a head nod when you're ready to go. I'm just kind of freestyling.
So I don't know if you want, I just emailed you the full fleshed out thing, so I don't know if it's easier to do through this computer or...
Sure, just give us...
connect there otherwise. So if it's not, your laptop won't connect to these screens.
Okay, so I have to do it through the USB?
Yeah, so just pull the USB out there.
So we'll just take the time to get that straightened away. So does council have any questions for me? So I think we definitely want to hear what council thinks today, but and sort of if you see that there's something missing, but where we really wanted to start it today was sort of show you how we got where we got to and why staff, really felt, based on the feedback that we heard from the public and have obviously heard from council over the last year or so, the direction that we were heading. So really wanted to give council the opportunity to see, and explain why we got where we got to and how we got where we got to before we give you the opportunity to sort of chime in. So I hope that aligns with council's expectations for today, but if you have any other questions on the process just as we complete setup, I'd be happy to answer. Any other? No? That's pretty straightforward. So again, what was really important to me is that we would be able to measure and we would be able to report back and say, we've done the things that we set out to do, and I've really challenged the team. If you're going to see something in the final draft plan, that's because it's something that we legitimately believe that we can accomplish over the next 5 years. And if we don't, we better have a pretty darn good excuse as to why we didn't, whether that's a global pandemic or some other situation that's out of our control. But it really is the senior leadership team and my intention to deliver on everything that you're going to see in that draft plan in January. That's the ambition that we have for this plan, and it is a very high-level document, which is important to mention, and it's some people, when they're looking at this, they may not see some of the more detailed action items that they're expecting, but it's important to remember again that this is sort of our highest level document, and we have lots of other strategic documents, whether it's in the economic development and tourism space, or of course we're working on our parks and master plan right now. So when it comes to some of those very specific areas, that's where you're going to get more granular, more into the nitty-gritty details. This is really the high level, sort of foundation that we're going to build on over the next 5 years. So I hope that's clear. Dan, you're going to save me and jump in there?
No, I think that was a great overview, and I apologize for my tardiness, a bit of an adventure getting over here this afternoon. But I appreciate everyone's time and being able to sit together as a group just to go through sort of the work that's been compiled to date. And I know we briefly touched upon it at an update meeting earlier in November. So this is way more of an in-depth review, but also some good conversation. One of the big deliverables of this project, included some pretty comprehensive engagement with the community, including going through a pretty intense survey that was very well responded to. So I really also wanted to comb through some of those results and give you some information about where the community's headspace is at in terms of what degree of level of service do they feel they're being provided. And there's lots of good strengths and good things to build off of, but also some really illuminating information that we filtered back in the strategic plan to show you, this is why we've included these contents. Again, it's not coming from me. It's coming initially from you, from the community, from SLT, from your supervisors and managers, and now into this plan. So again, really the purpose of this meeting was just to inform you on the development of the strategic plan and the priorities and actions that have been identified for the next 5 years. And really, when I go through projects like this, one of the important things for me is to ensure that there's synergy between council staff and the community on what those needs and priorities and areas of focus are. Right, everyone needs to be on the same page. Just because everyone's going to have some form of responsibility, especially at a political and administrative level, in moving a lot of these things forward, right? Like it comes from within. So this is really just to make sure we're really on the same page here. So just in terms of the overview, Kyle was mentioning that really, and I think everyone in the room has a solid understanding of where the strategic plan fits and why it's important, but if we look at the strategic plan, like sort of the pyramid of things, or planning documents, work plans, budgeting within the city, the intent of the strategic plan is really to sit at the top and be that overarching plan that informs all aspects of the organization, from like decision making to service delivery, to how you conduct yourselves internally. It really sets the tone for everything. Obviously, underneath it is, that sort of second high-level document tends to be your official plan, right, which guides you, your comprehensive guide for land use and development and managing growth in the community and the infrastructure that comes with it. But underneath these two, call them like the high-level plans, that's where you start seeing, as Kyle was saying, the supplementary plans, strategies, policies, bylaws, all of the more specific planning tools that get developed to, implement the overarching direction of the strategic plan, but are also informed by it. So ideally, everything sort of lines down. In the context of this project, we're really looking to take this one step further and create some department work plans, which are like specific year-to-year work plans that really list out by department. Going back to the strategic plan, these are the things that we're going to do specifically to implement it, to make sure that it's a working document, that it's being moved ahead on. So that's sort of the next phase of this project. Once we kind of confirm the strat plan, is to go through a department work planning initiative, and then ultimately at the bottom, it's to inform your operating and capital budget. So how you prioritize programs, projects, and services or service levels based on your revenue and expenses, and how that ties back to all of the higher documents above it. So this is sort of the pyramid. Again, it's really just to illustrate how the strategic plan is intended to fit into the fold of everything that you do, and it's really to be that first guide. So a lot of the contents in this plan that we'll go through today, you'll see like some of it's very specific, like this is a project that we feel we need to do. But it's also intended to establish like some priority areas and some goals, because like in the next 5 years, things are going to change and evolve. New areas or new situations that are going to emerge, and ideally the strat plan provides some guidance with how you deal and manage with those as well. So again, if at any point today there's a question, comment, you want to slow down and have a bit of a discussion, just let me know. This really is, intended to be a discussion, less of, me talking for 3 hours. So, just in terms of the process, this is the same slide I showed to you last time, just with the.
I did kind of go through this, Dan, if you want to save the time.
Okay. So maybe we'll start back up from here. So one thing I wanted to start off the hop here, and again, this is going to be a bit more of a discussion point, but just kind of setting the stage for that discussion, is really combing through like the roles and responsibilities, that the mandate of the City of Kenora as an organization in providing services to the community. And some of those are, they're required of you. They're things that you have to do, from providing, utilities, fire protection, these sorts of things. We call those like the direct responsibilities or like your core responsibilities. Then there's like this whole other side, we call like indirect, like things that aren't your responsibility, but you're starting to get pulled into it. Whether it's the province, downloading, things onto you as a municipality, whether it's growing community expectations of what they feel, the city needs to be involved with. And this is something that's really important to discuss, because you'll see later on in the presentation, when it comes to figuring out like what's most important to community, a lot of those areas fall within what I would say is more of like your indirect role, like things that you aren't responsible for, but the community is now expecting you to be. So like a good discussion I'd like to have today with everyone in this room is like what, and we'll get to this slide in a few slides, but like what is our position in these certain areas, and where do we feel we need to act or put resources into, or maybe not. Maybe our role is really just to be an advocate and someone who can connect stakeholders together. So I apologize if the text is really good, or really small on here, but these are two figures that I pulled up from Ontario Ministry of Municipal Affairs report that just show the spending on select local services by all municipalities in 2018. Obviously at the top, roads, transit, wastewater, protective services. These are sort of the big expenditures, that municipalities are dealing with on a year in, year out basis. And, clearly like, areas that are more within your core mandate. Also like parks and recreation, fire protection, solid waste. But as you see, like kind of filtering through this list are areas that, again, have been traditionally provided by a different level of government, like going back to social assistance, childcare, long-term care, public health. And I know everyone in the room, I know that happens here too. I know like every community or every municipality in Ontario is feeling this, and I know in Northwestern Ontario it is as well. The graph on the right shows, spending on each of these services, but broken down by like who's financing it or funding it. So if something, and I apologize, I'm a little colorblind, so I'm going to try to decipher these colors, but fire, I believe that is purple, is 100% funded by municipal revenues. Parks and recreation, 98%, library and culture, 97%. But now if you look at the bottom, like some of these areas that are, not traditionally the responsibility of a municipality, like public health, long-term care, social assistance, there's some pretty big municipal chunks in there, right? It's just showing how like spending habits or budgeting habits are evolving in communities here. So I just wanted to show this information because it's just like a good, showcase of trends that are happening through the province. These are trends that are happening through Canada as well. Which leads back to, this important discussion about city responsibility. So in the strategic plan, like we talk about this early on in the document, and this is for community to set expectations and let them know, like, these are the direct and indirect areas that Kenora is responsible for providing some level of service or full servicing. So on the direct side, we have core services. The City of Kenora, you directly provide to the community and have a municipal responsibility to do so, or in some cases you've chosen to do so because it's very important, like municipal docking is an example of that. or on the indirect side, services that the city is not directly responsible for, but you can play some level of role in. And, that role can be everything from just being an advocate in saying, to different levels of government or other stakeholders, we need this as a community, we need to improve this area, whether it's connecting stakeholders. So that can be, just linking groups together, helping share resources, coordinating activities, whether that's through, your city approvals and processes, so just making it easier for people to do things that do provide services or, indirect services to the community, or, whether it's through funds or contracts where you're funding a service but not necessarily providing it. So we've kind of broken it down into these two categories. Some direction I got early on in the project was it's really important that the community understands this, and that we really clarify to make it clear in the strategic plan is sort of one of the first things that you see. So, I really just wanted to bring this up. This is like the Kenora list that we fleshed out in the plan. It's going to be turned into a nice infographic, but again, on the left, these are all the things you're providing right now. On the right, these are things that you are, sometimes being expected to provide that aren't necessarily your responsibility, but, like for example, housing, there's a high degree of, the city can really inform housing development. It's not your responsibility, but you can do things to facilitate or promote it. Other things like, EMS being a Kenora District Services Board service, you're essentially just paying for that through, your annual transfers to them. Environmental stewardship, again, is it the city's responsibility to promote stewardship in the region? I think there's a role there, but, within your own operations, you can mitigate, potential impacts. So you can see, even if it's not a direct responsibility, the city will still get pulled into it in different ways. So with that in mind, we are going to have a discussion on this in a few slides. So if there's any questions or comments about these last few, I'd be more than happy to hear them, but we will have some chance to chat about it later on in the presentation. All good. Does this look pretty reflective? Yeah, and this is, do you feel in the community, there's a bit of a gap in the understanding of these two columns?
A bit?
Yeah.
It's a large gap.
Yeah.
There is a large gap.
But I think it's important too that there's a large gap, but it's not through a lack of trying on the part of the city to clarify roles and functions. If I, as a citizen, I'm upset about something, that's what I'm going to focus on. So I think the reinforcement of our roles and responsibilities is always key. That's my thought.
And I think that it's, when Kyle did his podcast and he talked about the difference between coming from Alberta and the fact that most provinces do not, or municipalities do not pay for the stuff on the right here, the social services that got downloaded onto Ontario back in the late 1990s. That's really important for the community to realize, because that really impacts on investment in our community, because it's higher taxes. So when business is looking at places to locate, the fact that we pay for these services in our province, as opposed to most of the other provinces, when business are looking to locate, that plays a big component in their decision of where to locate. That was a real important distinction. I'm glad you made that in your podcast, Kyle, because coming here and recognizing that right off the bat was really important.
Well, I think every province uses a different model, and all the other municipalities in Ontario are going through the same challenges that we're going through. I just think it's illustrative because we are being expected to do more with less. And, so we're all in this together as far as Ontario municipalities go, but it is something that I think is important to keep expressing, just because we can't do everything for everyone, can't be all things to all people, and we have to make choices, and there's trade-offs every time you make a choice.
And that's the reason why.
It's one of the big reasons, for sure.
Is there any other questions or comments on sort of these first few slides? All right. We can always cycle back. So the next section I wanted to go through is just some results from the community survey that was put out. So we had about 1,000 responses for that survey. There's a lot of quantitative and qualitative information there about like what the community feels is important, where they feel the community has been trending over the last 5 years. And that's going to be made available to you. There's an engagement summary report as part of this. But it is very detailed. So I've done these projects quite a bit, like whether it's official plan type level projects or strategic plans where we do surveys like this. This was probably the most detailed one we've ever received back. So the information is really, really solid. So we posted this survey. I'll just move this. So we posted this survey from June to July, let's just say 2021, sorry, over the summer. So we had 1,000 responses with answers varying between 550 and 1,000 responses per question. And a lot of them were, they would ask a question like, assess this level of service in Kenora. And they'd kind of rate it. Now, how do you feel it's, evolved over the last 5 years? So you can see like how people think things are today and where they see the trends going. Which is really important to know both of those things. So these first two slides, like the first one is like, just show like, what following statement best describes you. So it's mostly, essentially all residents or people who access services in Kenora. It's very interesting at the bottom, 70% of the survey respondents have lived in Kenora for more than 20 years. So lots of long-term residents who have been here for some time and have, had that ability to see the community evolve over a longer duration. Starting off, so with these bars, essentially anything that's orange and green, represents like fair to very good, like we're in a good state. Red obviously, is sort of on, an area that we need to focus on improving. And, one thing I'll say about these results, because these ones, like they really jump out, that's why I wanted to show them first. One thing to consider is when we looked at the data, because I saw this, I was like, okay, what's the story behind this? When we looked at the data, these results for these two questions were really, you could really see it transform after some information went out to the community. We had like 500 responses over 2 days, and it was kind of at the end, there were some community groups who had said like, we need to talk about this. There were some aspects about, downtown safety that had been brought up. So that's where this is coming from. But I also think it echoes, sentiments in this room and outside. Not saying that like Kenora is an unsafe place, but it's an area where the community is saying, we don't know, exactly what needs to be done, but this is an area we would like to see effort and focus put in. So, we have quality of life today in Kenora. Figure 6 is how has it evolved. Included in figure 6 or question 6, there was, can you provide us some comments on this? And the comments were more about, it was tying it back to safety. That's where it was coming from. So emotionally charged responses. Figure 7, again, in figure 8, questions directly related to safety. And you'll see later on when we asked residents to rank all the issues, like 1 to 10 sort of thing, safety was the #1 priority that came up throughout the survey. So I don't want to dwell on this because I don't want this to seem like it's negative. There's a lot of like really good positive things we're going to go through. You'll see like the community is recognizing that there are some big strengths to build off of here. These two questions, the one on the left says, from a scale of 1 to 5, rate the following quality of life characteristics in Kenora. So everything from your neighborhood to recreational facilities, to a place to raise kids, a place to retire. And again, anything yellow and green is good. Anything, red is an area to improve, or people who feel there needs to be improvement. If you want to talk about positive elements in the survey, like I think how would you rate the parks, recreation, culture, and heritage services? Like there's a lot of yellow and green there, which to me the community is really saying like we have a solid foundation of public library services, museum services, recreation facilities, special events. Like we're doing really good here, parks and open spaces. And I'm happy to leave this up for a minute or two if you want to go through it and ask any questions. As I said before, for all these questions we included, like, do you have any comments that you'd like to provide to this? So,
Yeah, can I just ask a very general question?
Yep.
When we look at, and I appreciate your comments about health or safety issues in the community and COVID, and is there a margin of flexibility, like in the qualitative data you get through the survey, that allows for that? Like right now we're going through a period, like a lot of municipalities across the country are going through this period with safety issues, with drugs and addiction and that sort of thing. So is there, when we're setting a strat plan, although it's critical and it's important when we look at that, is there kind of like a, I'm not sure how to phrase it, like a little bit of a margin of error when you start doing that, start coming up with your targets?
Really good question. So when I do surveys like that's why I always include that qualitative element.
Okay.
Because like and you could because you can go through survey by survey and you can check to see like when they were all like, so we looked through the big chunk that came in like those 2 days when, so a lot of that to me was sort of triggered by, a response in the community. But when you comb through the qualitative data and in the engagement report, like we've codified it, we've gone through every written answer and said, these are the themes that are popping up.
Okay.
And again, I think it's just things every community in Northwestern Ontario is dealing with. Like, I'm doing a project in Dryden, and it's the exact same conversation. So I don't think this is unique to Kenora at all. I think it's, but also something that the community is clearly saying this is important and we need to look at this, in a more focused light. Not that we're not doing that already, but yeah.
Okay.
Very good question.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Dan? Councillor Poirier here.
Hi, Dan. So when I'm looking on the left-hand side, I started getting a little nervous and concerned about the bottom 5 or 6, I guess. Because that ultimately is the future, and that when you're talking about a place to raise children, attracting young professionals because of the nature of jobs now where they're so, they're so transferable and they can be done anywhere. So people complain, but did we get some responses that could actually help us change that narrative?
No, for sure. Like if you want to specifically attractiveness to young professionals, I think a lot of the comments came back to accessibility of housing.
Housing, okay.
Right? So you can see a lot of these things are tied to broader priorities, and housing was the second highest rated, this is big issue that the community needs to focus on. So, some of these things too, we talked about this at this supervisor and manager meeting, value of services provided, for taxes paid. Every community in Canada is going to have a similar response to that because there's always some group of the population that feels like they're not getting value. This is just how it is. And I've done enough projects to see that come up pretty much everywhere. So I'm actually pretty excited to send over those engagement results, including the full survey, and I'm sure there'll be lots that you can pick through as well. We've gone through it with staff, and they've kind of felt that same thing, some really good info to kind of sift through. So was there any questions related, because we have a few more of these graphs related to figure 9 or figure 15? All right, well, maybe I'll hop to the next one here. So in terms of core infrastructure, drinking water, sewer, flooding and stormwater management, pretty high level of content there in the community, which is pretty good. In terms of transportation services as well, like sidewalks, traffic management, street clearings, snow removal, again, pretty strong scores there as well. The public transit one is a little, there were over 300 don't know responses for that one, so the results get skewed a little bit, just because a lot of people don't have knowledge or experience taking public transit in Kenora. Roads, again, that's one that's generally that's a pretty typical score, I'd say, especially in the prairies in Northwestern Ontario. where winter can wreak havoc on our road infrastructure. But again, like I think these are good examples of like some of the core elements of the community are in good shape. Recreation, infrastructure, transportation. There's some good positive feedback from the community here on these. So I don't know if there are any, again, any questions, comments on this set of graphs. So the next one, again, figure 23, rating, development and administrative services. So for, customer service utility billing, pretty good scores there on the land use planning development approvals. This one, I went through some of the written comments and I had a hard time understanding this one just because like for the majority of people, they never get a service, like they're not putting in applications for rezoning or for effect, like it's just not a very common thing. So I think this is more of just, maybe people anecdotally are saying, there's maybe red tape or something in the city, but don't actually understand the process. And there weren't any good, like there wasn't written feedback in the qualitative answers that could really flesh out like why there may be some slanting towards the poor, very poor side on this question. So, and then figure 27, rating communications.
Dan?
Yep.
Just a quick comment on that one. I wonder too, council and staff have gone through a couple of very difficult rezoning over the past couple of years. And I'm wondering if that's kind of been a catalyst for some of the feedback from the community on climate. There's been some reactions to some of the zoning that we've had to do.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that's been a kind of an influence.
I mean, it very could well be, especially if there's like a larger publicly visible project, which are always the most complicated and the ones that need to be assessed with the highest degree of, to a higher degree. So that very well could be it. I didn't get a sense of that in the responses, but I wouldn't be shocked if that was a contributing factor.
Really quick, Dan, I just want to make sure I'm reading this chart correctly. Am I reading that on the whole, people are pretty satisfied with the customer service they're getting from the city?
Yeah, I think it's a good building block. So, I don't receive front desk services from the city, but I think like the conversation we've had, internally about like people-focused services, like I'm sure that's probably playing out as well. And same thing on the communication side. Pretty strong scores overall, and we talk about like building blocks to build off of. The city does put a lot of effort into communicating with the community through social media, podcasts, other things, and it seems to be paying a dividend, at least how the community is interpreting it. So
That looks like a good scorecard to me.
yeah.
What surprises me is there's always that one small percentage. I would imagine if you could study the individual responses, there's a small sliver that is discontent with everything. And I think you see an awful lot of that. If you look at social media now, there's the same people that there's nothing that will ever please them. So there is that certain percentage. I'm as I look at it, try to interpret how much of that is there, and because I've become very aware of that recently. That there's a lot of angry people out there that are just angry.
Yeah, and I look at these scores and like knowing that we had 500 responses through like a very charged like community discussion, and you saw it in the community safety questions, which is what prompted them to respond to the survey. Like that didn't filter down into like every other question. And I was like, we're maybe a little emotional about this, but when it comes to like communication, service, parks and rec, we're okay. So it's funny, like the community safety results didn't really translate to any other area in the survey, and I think that's a good thing, or a positive thing of the survey. So one of the final questions we just asked, like, of all these issues, what is the most important thing to focus on? And I picked the top 5 here. So community and safety and crime, housing, healthcare, social conditions, and local economy and employment. You know, community growth and development was a very close sixth. So, you know, when I look at this graph, you know, going back to the conversation we just had, you know, there's a growing expectation, you know, in communities across Ontario that, you know, their elected officials and administration need to be more involved in these areas, but they're traditionally outside of your mandate. And there isn't infinite resources to go around to dealing with these things. So, like, really, I was hoping we could have a bit of a, excuse me, a bit of a conversation to go through each one of these top 5 and maybe discuss, like, where does the city maybe fit into the fold here? You know, what are some things we're already doing? What are some things, and some of these things have been reflected in the strategic plan, you know, things that we can do to work towards it. But, you know, thinking about where do we sit in the spectrum of like trying to address these things? Are we an advocate? Are we, you know, a funder but not providing the service? Are we directly involved? Does this need to become part of what we do? So, you know, we can go through these in order, or we can jump around, or we can just think about it for a bit. I'm happy to take notes on this, but also understand it's a lot to throw at you. So if you need a few minutes just to think about it, we can take some time. Is there any like kind of like overarching thoughts or comments on like, you know, kind of what we talked about in terms of roles, responsibilities, and like, you know, these 5 priority areas that have come up?
Just a general comment when I'm looking at healthcare. Although it's not a responsibility of the city and it's not one of the core services, but the city actively advocates and participates with community partners in supporting access to healthcare. I think of the All Nation Health Partners, for example. The city's been participating on that for ever since it began, and I think one of our staff, Heather, participates on physician recruitment, health professional recruitment. So although it's not our mandate, as a community member, we participate on that. And I would sense just an overarching statement with community safety and crime. The city is also very much a strong advocate. Sits at a number of different tables advocating. I think housing we're well versed in. We don't deliver it. Very actively pursue housing with those responsible for it.
Setting the conditions.
Setting conditions, providing data, providing information, advocate to upper levels of government. And I would expect, in fairness to the general public, they're not going to know about a lot of that. They're not going to know about the amount of advocacy that goes on the part of the city with other community partners. So that's just a couple of comments.
But the reality is we can't make decisions that drive success in those areas.
That's right.
I agree with you.
Been here for 8 years, and those would probably be the priorities 5 years ago if we had done the same. But we cannot, you know, no matter what we do, we've not had success driving housing in the community. No matter what we do, access to healthcare is way beyond what we at this table can deal with. So it makes it very difficult if those are the priorities of the community, unless we can get that message out to them. If their expectation is the 7 people and the senior leadership in the city of Kenora are going to change every one of those within the community, that's not gonna happen. Grant?
Yeah, I think specifically, like housing as an example, there are certain things that we can do and maybe are being considered with the revision of our official plan to speed up approvals, to make the planning process easier. And part of that could also be through better communication on how that process works. A good example in terms of how I see it, when people go through the PAC process, we have one city planner who's working on an application for, let's say, somebody on Black Sturgeon who needs a minor variance to build a boathouse or a boat port or something that's larger than what's allowed. That planner is then burning up a lot of time for something that doesn't have a ton of impact for housing everywhere else, but now may push back his ability to do things on other files. So, I think we need to take a look at that department, how it's resourced and how the planning committee works, because a focus should be done on making things a lot quicker and a little easier to get through that process so that we can get some wins in the housing file. So I think there's a relationship there between the workload and some of the processes that we have in place that maybe there's some tweaking that needs to be made there. And that's just my 2 cents from sitting on that committee for several years and understanding that, certain individuals who do come to the city with housing development plans, it takes a long time to get from the start to the finish line. And I think we need to find a way to speed that up a bit. And I think that we've made progress in doing that. So I think the city has recognized that and has taken steps, but I want to continue exploring what other steps we can take, in the next year, in the next 5 years. Which is my 2 cents. Because housing is obviously the biggest challenge. I mean, a lot of employers, a lot of businesses struggle to find housing for their staff. It really is preventing us from growing and being able to be a more attractive place for people.
It's you made a really good point. Just a small example about like variances. You're taking away human resource capacity, and you're at a great opportunity, right? Like you're going through a comprehensive review of your official plan and zoning bylaw update, where you can maybe look at the last 10 years of variance applications and figure out like what's triggering all of these, and you can go in and fix it.
I'll just interrupt. There were several minor variance applications that were more or less rubber stamps, but it's still a lengthy process, and it ties up the planner's ability and the staff's ability to do other applications which will have way more impact. So really, there's a bottleneck there in the planning process.
So, right, nail on the head there. One other thing I don't know where I was going to really fit it into this conversation, just kind of brought it up. The city's really been doing a lot of we call it long-range planning initiatives, like the tourism, economic development strategy, the strategic plan, official plan. This is generally speaking a very good time to do these long-range planning initiatives. Typically, when I lived in BC, when we went through the Alberta oil recession, which part of BC I lived in was also part of that area. It was a great time to do all this work because things weren't super busy. So you can spend the time to put in all the planning in place for when things kick off again. And with COVID kind of ending, or who knows when it's going to end, but when it does, things will immediately pick up. So this really is a really strategic time to do a lot of this stuff, addressing exactly what you're saying. So I didn't know I was going to make that point in the conversation, but ended up being there. So sorry, back to this. Were there any other questions, comments, discussion around roles in these different areas?
So I've got a couple of comments.
Yep.
On just a couple of things I've had a chance or an opportunity right now to think through. But to Graham's point about planning and development, that sounds to me like a lack of capacity. That sounds to me like planners and at the Adam types, the directors are doing work that
You get the t-shirt out.
but should not be doing. So to me, that looks like it's operating budget that's hiring another staff person. And that capacity can be addressed that way. I don't think that's rocket science. And if that's a problem, I think that's kind of an easy fix. But I was thinking a little bit more about the access to healthcare. And I really think that Kenora and the Northwest region is on the cusp of some really big stuff right now. I look at the All Nations Healthcare Partnerships, the Ontario Health Teams, the NOSM that's transferring into a University of Medical Care in Thunder Bay. I think of the new hospital. I think of the things that the Kenora Chiefs are doing. And I think there's tremendous opportunity here for, if the municipality is not a major player, to certainly be involved. Because some of these are going to be long-term. We know that hospital's down the road. The university is going to happen. But if we had an opportunity to feed into some of those strategic plans and start influencing decision-making, we could have a part of that university and new hospital could be a teaching facility. And the mental health, to make sure we have a campus-type facility where we're working in partnership with the Indigenous organizations to make sure that when we're doing that long-term planning, we're thinking of everything. I really think Kenora in the Northwest could be a leader in this area going forward, but we need to get in fast, and we have to be involved. So I really think that's going to be long-term, but I think in no better time than now with everything that's happening to be involved. So I haven't had a chance to think through some of the other stuff. When I look at local economy and employment, I think that what I see it is a labor shortage. And I don't see employment as much as a lack of workers, a lack of labor force. So where can we be involved with other agencies, skills and development? Because and I think Kenora can be a leader in that area also. I mean, we have a healthy trades community. The apprenticeship program, ever since I've been on council 12 years, there's been problems with the apprenticeship program. We're still talking about that. So where can we make impact strategically at those levels that'll make a difference? And look at the labor shortage and how we can be working with, the colleges and the universities. Well, even with 7 Gens over here, the shortage of PSWs and their course over there and their nursing program, and actively trying to bring in our neighbors from the northern communities to fill those gaps. So I think there's also tremendous opportunity. Are we going to be an active player? I think we need to be involved, and we can be leaders. So I think that there's opportunities there for us, and to be working in partnership. The other stuff, the social conditions. The social conditions. Well, you know what? Social conditions are clean streets, proper lighting, and one strategy I read about years ago with our community improvement plans, and this is kind of a different slant on a community improvement plan, because we always think of community improvement plans as being business facing and business focused. But what about front porch communities? Because we always used to have residential areas with front porch communities, and when people were sitting out on their front porches, it's high neighbors, and we're looking after our kids as they're playing in their neighborhoods. So why couldn't there be incentives for people that, well, you want to add a front porch onto your house? Well, let's waive your building permit fees for doing that. I mean, there's something that we could be thinking about when it comes to community improvement plans, is taking some of that incentives to build communities where people are on the streets and watching our kids. Maybe that kind of stuff helps, right? Because that's the stuff we did when, our parents were young and when we were younger, is to be involved, and we watched our neighbors' kids. And so, for social conditions, I just think that's something that's ongoing. Housing, I think we've been working hard. And I think if we can get some shovels in the ground next year, we're going to see some positive traction. Well, when you look at social conditions and just what I said about more neighborhood involvement, that's community safety and crime also, right?
I mean, like, essentially all 5 of those are interrelated or
Absolutely.
involved with each other in some degree or another. Really good thoughts. Looking around the room, I don't know if there was other comments related to this. I think there's been a, at least from what I've heard, like a, pretty strong consensus in like recognizing like where that level of involvement is, for each of these areas. So I've been making notes, but, definitely like setting conditions or being that advocate and connector and not taking on too much direct financial responsibility for things happening in each of those areas is kind of what I'm hearing, which is looking back to those slides, kind of where you would fit in. So I don't know if there's any contrasting thoughts on it. Yeah.
Just a short, very short comment. I think it goes back to a couple of slides earlier, and I'm not asking you to go back. And it talked about ensuring somehow that people understand the core services of the city. And respecting Dan's comment, or Mayor Marina's comment, these are not within our core mandate. We play a role in it, but it's not our core mandate. And it just continued communication to the public. We can't ignore them, but I think some core principles have to be out there, and our staff are doing that.
So we can always come back to this question if there's more thoughts on it, but just in terms of moving on, and really like the focus of this work or this workshop or presentation today was really to go through the more detailed comments or content, that have been included in the initial draft strategic plan. So some of these things we went through very quickly at the meeting in November, but this is an opportunity to go through it in more detail, to ask questions, understand where they're coming from, whether it's community sentiment or, yourselves or staff saying, this is how we feel we can realistically move forward in these areas. But just a good chance to have some review and discussion. So, for some reason that skipped ahead a whole bunch of slides there. So in terms of getting to this point and the stuff that we're going to show later, and I kind of went through this quickly at the last meeting, but starting at the top in the beginning of the project, we really tried to establish what your priorities were, what you felt was most important for the community, and use those as sort of areas to focus discussion on in subsequent phases of the project. So I had a slide, and I'll show it again, that kind of highlighted these like 10 different areas that you said, this is important to us, this is what we feel is important to community. We took those things and engaged the community through the survey, through stakeholder meetings, through engagement at different events in the community to say like, does this reflect what's important to you? And by far it was mostly, yeah, this is kind of on page. From that, we took those priorities and went through again like that intensive review process with the senior leadership team, managers and supervisors, where we worked together to say, okay, this is what's important. This is where our focus needs to be. But what are the actual tangible things that the city's either doing, has started, is already doing, or has identified that could push us ahead in that space? In addition to adding things that we heard from yourselves and from community, and that kind of really fleshed out the plan, which we then took into this past supervisor manager review phase, where we sat down with senior staff. There was about 40 of us in the room that day. We really combed through this and said, do you feel like this is practical? Do you feel like this is realistic, something that we can achieve with the resources given in a way that actually moves forward what's important to council and community and the organization as a whole? So going back to Kyle's points, like this was really a collaborative effort, and there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion that's been going on for the past 8 months really to get us to this point that we're at today. So I showed this little image or slide last time. It was just showing like how we got from step 1 to step 6 in terms of setting direction. Like, step 1, you setting vision and key priorities. Step 2, in the summer, we engaged the community and made sure you got verification on those priorities or confirmation. Step 3, with the SLT and staff, that big internal review went on for a couple months. where they really went through it in detail. We did the quick update in November. Step 5 was taking it back out to senior leadership, supervisors, and managers, sort of this outline that we've created, and now we're bringing it back all the way around circle to council and eventually to community in the new year. So one last chance for review with the community before the plan gets submitted for endorsement or adoption. And this is just the slide that I showed last time. Like, these were the initial 10 priority areas that got brought up from our original workshop way back in May, it was May. Indigenous relationships, environmental stewardship, a greener city, long-term planning for growth, housing development. Again, a lot of things that I think are nothing's really changed unless maybe something has. But this is what was brought up in April and what has sort of been reiterated throughout the whole planning process to date. And I showed this slide last time as well, but just refresh on kind of how the strategic plan is structured. Like, when you look at the actual draft document, when the new revised version's prepared, at the beginning there's sort of like the introduction, like what is a strategic plan, why is it important, how does it inform what we do. There's a section on cities' roles and responsibilities, so what we just talked about and making that clear, but the bulk of the plan is on these different areas. So having the vision and mission statement, the vision describing the organization, City of Kenora's aspiration for the community over the next 5 years. The mission, like what is our fundamental purpose or ambition as an organization. The focus areas, like what are these priority areas? Like we saw 10 on the last slide, but we've kind of broken them down into 5 focus areas that we're going to dedicate our resources and energy to. For each focus area, there's a number of goals, which are like, for this focus area, our goal by 2026 or 2027 is this. And then following this is the list of projects, like the tangible things we can do, and we're going to go through those today as well, so you'll be able to see kind of everything before we lay it out in the revised draft. I just want to make sure this isn't skipping ahead. There we go. So again, just to reiterate, things that Kyle's probably brought up already and what I've said, but really the broad objectives with this strategic plan were to make sure aligned with real community needs and priorities, to make sure the draft sits within the parameters of the city's responsibilities as an organization, and areas where you kind of are creeping out a little bit, really making that clear that there's a specific role there, like it's not your responsibility, to be tangible, practical, and measurable, and within the human and fiscal capacity of the city. So part of that filtering process with staff was, taking, some initiatives out and putting some in, but trying to make it sure that it's within that realm of feasibility, and to create it through, again, collaboration. So in the future, when it comes to different departments implementing some of these initiatives, like they know, other departments that can support them, they can work together. So really trying to foster collaboration on the service delivery side, and then creating a sense of self-ownership over the document. And one thing I heard early in the process is in some of the past strategic planning initiatives, staff didn't feel that sense of ownership over the document. So we really try to involve them so they feel it, it's coming from them, because ultimately they're going to have to really work off of it on like a day-to-day level. So on that note, I'm happy to jump into the first few slides, which is just a review of kind of the refined vision, mission, and values that have been provided or included in the initial draft.
Got some folks coming here.
Oh, they gotta go around. They're up on the second floor. Oh,
What was it? What's that
go
one?
around to the front.
Just go around to the front.
Jump in, Sharon.
It's away. On a different
And
floor.
we're all dressed up.
Pretty brave and no jackets on.
I know.
And the girls with bare arms.
Did you set that up?
Yeah, I thought I'd ratchet up the formality of this meeting. Wait till you see the cake.
Good man.
Going back to the vision and mission, and these really are like, they may seem like just a few sentences, but they're very important for setting the tone and just creating a sense, among council, among the, the organization staff and the community about where we're at, and just making sure we're on the same page. So again, we worked through this quite a few times with community. We reviewed it with yourselves, but we've also refined it with staff. And that vision for Kenora, that ambition for Kenora as a community is that Kenora provides a high quality of life for residents and unforgettable experiences for visitors by celebrating and embracing the community's rich heritage, diversity, and natural environment. And our mission, again, our fundamental purpose and ambition as an organization is that, the City of Kenora's mission is to be an accountable, collaborative, and informed team that takes pride in delivering value-added municipal services. So in our last review process, there are a few words and tweaks that people felt were important to make, and those have been made. But I don't know if there's any thoughts or comments from the group here on what we've prepared.
I would agree with those statements.
I'm not brave enough to challenge the SL senior leader.
Yeah, they're way smarter than us.
I know my place in the organization. Looks good to me.
Yeah, and going back to kind of that circle I was showing, a lot of the sentiment here came from that first meeting that we had, where we went through, remember I was putting sticky notes on that kind of online mural board, and we were asking those questions like, what is council's vision? A lot of that kind of ended up in there as well and was sort of massaged with SLT. So again, going back to being a collaborative process. So I'm happy to keep this here for a couple seconds if there's any other thoughts or comments, or if people are generally pretty good with it.
I think when it comes to these things, just what I would say really quickly is, these are the types of things that would typically provide some continuity from document to document, from council to council. But, there has been a fair amount of, new leadership at the city. This is this council's first opportunity to put their stamp on a strategic plan. Lots of new leadership, both around this table and elsewhere in the organization. So, we really were looking to sort of tweak these with the new direction that the city is heading. And so it's a little bit different than what we started with, but is also, I think, maintains the themes that came from the past strat plan. So I just thought I would touch on that.
So going on what Kyle was saying about continuity, the next piece is sort of these corporate values. These values that, as an organization, as a community, we want to embody when we conduct ourselves, make decisions. Again, why these are important is, strategic plan can't predict the future, can't touch upon all the things that are going to happen and emerge. But having a set of values that you can go back to and say, does this align with our values? It's just, an important piece that can help inform decisions. So these have been largely carried over from the past strat plan, but there were, some tweaks and changes and some additions and takeaways. But, from collaboration, communication, citizen and customer service, sustainability, for the environment, but also fiscally, being innovative, being ready, and promoting trust and respect in the organization. This is what, people felt was really important to articulate in the plan.
It's interesting, under innovation, to have the word curiosity in there, which makes sense for that value.
I can assure you we've deliberated on each word in great detail.
It fits.
So yeah, I don't know, again, happy to hear any comments, thoughts, seeing some head nods, like this is looking good. Yeah.
I can't help but think that it's more important that the SLT drove this project as opposed to council. You know, a year from now, who knows who's going to be sitting around this table? But when I look out, with the exception of me, this is our future, our SLT. You know, you talked about 25% of the people weren't here last time we did an SLT, or I did a strategic plan at the SLT team. So they're going to drive the city. So I have much more comfort knowing that they believe in the plan and they had a solid input in the plan and they believe they can achieve this plan. That's where I get a sense of security from as I move forward.
That's really good comment, and it goes back to again being a very hands-on from an administrative level type project, like very, as Kyle said, word by word, table by table sort of thing. So yeah, maybe I can just, if we're good here, I apologize, I keep zooming out. It's just it skipped a slide once. I don't want it to happen again. Okay, so that works. So going back to the focus areas, which again, what focus areas are? They're just like trying to like combine like all of these different priority areas in ways that make sense. It's just a way of organizing the plan. Think of them as like buckets. And for each bucket, there's a number of goals and like specific projects to do. And we went through these in November, and they've been changed very slightly. But again, they're specific themes or groups of themes that have been identified as priorities for the city to focus on in the next 5 years. Infrastructure and environment, tourism, economic growth and development, community well-being, recreation and safety, service delivery and organizational capacity, and relations with treaty partners. And there was a lot of thinking that went into 5 about how to approach this in a respectful way that was also inclusive. And staff came up with that one, and I think it fits pretty well. So what I'm going to do for the next bunch of slides is go through each one of these focus areas one by one and show, for the focus area, these are the goals that we've established, and this is why. And this is the projects or the initiatives that have been identified to move ahead on those over the next 5 years. And again, happy to hear any questions, comments, thoughts at any time as we go through this. Oops. I think did it there again. So for infrastructure and environment, goal 1, position Kenora for growth through proactive infrastructure planning. Goal 2, ensure well-maintained and sustainably financed city infrastructure. And goal 3, seek sustainable solutions to reduce environmental impacts of city operations. So in this pillar, and you can see like the goals are on the column to the left. The middle is like the actual specific projects that have been identified and how they relate back to a specific goal. And on the far right is input, like things that we heard from council, from community, from staff as we went through this process, like things that consistently got brought up. So the first list of projects, so number 1 was completing long-term master planning for infrastructure. Setting the conditions for growth. Going back to the comment I made earlier, generally slow periods are the best time to do long-range planning like this because you're not responding to like a big, massive development happening and activities happening. Allows you to like collect yourself and plan proactively for the future for when that growth does hit. Number 2, create infrastructure standards and design guidelines for development. So that's about having like, sound requirements for when people go and develop. It's clear like the infrastructure they need to develop and how things need to actually be built out, which is something that doesn't currently, it's not part of the city right now. Those requirements aren't in place. Very important. Most cities do have them, so definitely a gap that was identified. Number 2, perform a stormwater funding feasibility study. So, what are the financing options for upgrading stormwater infrastructure in the community? How could that be done in a sustainably funded or financed manner? Developing 3, 5, and 10-year capital plans. Completing the Kenora Sustainability Action Plan, so that's ongoing, but just finishing it off. Looking at a pilot project for solar for a municipal facility. So again, sometimes like promoting stewardship and getting the ball rolling can be done very well through like a pilot project. And I worked in a city that did this through a passive house. Like the city went and built a passive house that they lease out to, companies from time to time to take up office space. But it was a demonstration project, which is sort of what that is. And then the third one, it's been brought up, over time, if there's opportunities to bring electric vehicles and integrate them into the city's fleet in a way that makes sense, can we figure that out? Like, what are those opportunities? So not saying we're going to go and buy a bunch of EVs and bring them in, but like identify those opportunities where it makes sense from an operational and environmental perspective.
So just to jump in really quick, when you sort of look at goal 1, 2, 3 at the top, really good intention in there. None of those things would be really out of place, or some of them actually may be the exact same as what we had in the previous strat plan from 2015. When you get into the action project list there, that's really where I'm focused on measurement. So a lot of those are pretty easy to measure. Did you do it or did you not do it? There's going to be some things as we go through the rest of the draft plan that are going to be a little more nuanced in how you measure them, and the study how electric vehicles could be integrated into city fleet. That's one that's not exactly a checkbox. It's harder to measure, but it is our goal to be able to explain to council, and to measure our success in that area. Did we do it or did we not do it? And we're going to be coming back and providing regular reporting on that. So I just wanted to be clear on that. That sort of goal 1, 2, 3 is sort of where the strat plan stopped last time. And we're getting a little bit more detailed, and that's why the action, the projects are there, so you can see exactly what we're going to be measuring to demonstrate that we're living up to those 3 goals at the top. Does that make sense?
Councillor Warren?
Yeah, so I guess to Kyle, so the develop the 3, 5, and 10-year capital plans.
Sure.
I think that's a great idea. I really do. But does that include, like when we're talking about, because you're doing a feasibility study on how to finance stormwater and how to go about doing it instead of just throwing money in the budget every year, and water and sewer. So are they all going to be part of those 3, 5, and 10-year capital plans?
Yeah, like those 3, 5, and 10-year,
Utilities?
everything. The utilities, our infrastructure, our fire, our fleet, everything is going to be in the 3, 5, and 10-year. Now there's going to be some things, that won't appear in there. Maybe a new city hall would be a good example. You probably won't see that in the 3, 5, or the 10-year, right? But I think it's important to note, even though it probably feels like a long time for Charlotte that asset management's been around, like we're still very early. Asset management has sort of been industry best practice for about 10, 12 years now. So there is a lot of foundational work that goes into trying to figure out how to replace all of your infrastructure in a reasonable schedule. And so we're just really looking to dig in just that much harder. We've got to a point where we're compliant and we've got a good handle on our infrastructure, and now we're just trying to figure out how to prioritize. So that's really what the 3, 5, and 10-year is geared at there. But that will be comprehensive. Everything that we have from a facility, asset, fleet, equipment standpoint, infrastructure standpoint should be in there. Nothing is going to be off limits, and I don't know if anybody on the team wants to jump in to better explain that.
So with regards to the best standards of practice, we want to marry the difference between the life cycling of equipment and the cost to maintain it, to make sure to find out every community there's a soft spot of where that is for financially availability versus requirement. And you don't want to wait until it's breakdown maintenance to do that, because the costs are extremely high, and then the resources aren't available because you're experiencing it through breakdown, rather than finding out when that replacement before that breakdown gets taken care of, to not just disrupt the services and provide long sustainable infrastructure without critical failure. So putting a 3, 5, 10-year capital plan, obviously your 3 years are very strong, usually very strong and very tight, and you understand you can manage your fiscally responsibilities within those timelines. Your 5 and 10 are known, but there's movability in them depending on your level of priorities that exist, and more information creates more acknowledgement of where they fit on that list. So there's always a consistent reevaluation of your infrastructure to understand that they're being placed in the proper place and that we're prioritizing where we need to. So that's why we're trying to plan, make sure we're not burdening the financial ability versus the replacement of the risk.
And this is a huge tool from a continuity and a succession planning standpoint too, because when somebody comes in new, you're gonna be able to look at that, right? Rather than Kevin right now is trying a little bit to kind of figure it all out, just put all the information together. And so a document like this, as people come and go from the organization, it sort of gives people a baseline to look at. And as Kevin said, sometimes things happen and priorities change. A funding envelope is released, and so it kind of adjusts your plans a little bit on the fly. But this should provide us a pretty good, even if you're coming in brand new as a new council, you'd be able to sort of see what the plans are for 10 years and sort of be able to you just have that knowledge. So as you're making your decisions throughout your term, just sort of understand the rationale for why those are the pieces of infrastructure that administration is suggesting need focus on, if that makes sense. So it's all about getting that evidence and that data to make good decisions.
Councillor McMillan?
Could I just ask a very general question?
Yep.
And asking the question, I'm not asking you to change anything. I guess looking at the old traditional way, goal, action, project, input, I look at input as target and outcome, or is that the same thing?
Oh, so having that column on the right was just to show, what are the things that were said through like council, staff, community engagement that led to like this being developed. Like these were the themes that came up. So I was just trying to like link back the actual projects to things that were consistently brought up.
Because it makes sense. We just want to know.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm looking at this and not being part of the last one. Is this a real deviation the way we used to do it? Because this makes sense.
What is the deviation?
Because I struggled before. And now I'm looking at the process we went through with 5-year capital plan and stuff. Did this kind of have an impact on how you looked at your 5-year capital this year?
Yep.
Because some of the things I'm seeing here are explaining what we did at the capital meeting.
I saw it.
Because it just makes sense.
Well, it has to tie to the budget.
Yeah.
And down
But
the
I
right,
think
I
it goes
see it
beyond
reflected.
that, Sharon. Like, it just seems like, we used to get the report and there'd be 70 different things, and it's like, how does staff even try and meet some of these objectives? Like, these just seem like they're attainable and they're measurable, and you get excited about where the city's going. Like, they could be successful regardless of who's sitting in the 7 chairs.
Don't say that, Dan.
Well, as long as, you have some leadership, but it's the staff that's going to drive
Well,
it.
you look at some of these things too, just things have changed a little bit, more emphasis on environment and climate change, more emphasis on asset management and infrastructure, more emphasis, from our perspective, not that housing wasn't, very top of mind in 2015, but it's become just that much more top of mind. And so, that's what's driving, a lot of these things. So it's a little bit about how, things have trended over the last 5 years as well. And it's not that, the last strat plan was very useful. We just kept it pretty broad. And then as we were making decisions, we were sort of trying to say, okay, you're drafting a council report. Oh, here are the parts of the strategic plan that this report are in line with. This is just a little bit more focused. And like we said at the beginning, this is high level. There's decisions that we're making on a day-to-day basis that are driven by plans and that are driven by the official plan and driven by, our operating and our capital budgets. So These were sort of high-level foundations that we needed to set to stay in touch with the trends that are happening in local government and just in the trends that we're seeing locally. And that's, again, that comment on the right, which is, that's what councillors saying, staff is saying, and the public are saying they want to see from us. And that's how we were able to narrow down on these 7 things on this particular slide. And I hope that's helpful. It's just, we've tried to take the feedback that we received both internally and externally on the previous strat plan, and I think the previous strat plan served us well, and it got us to a good point. This was just sort of where we're at today. So just a little bit of a different flavor, but we feel really good about how we've gotten here, and certainly happy to answer any more questions that council has on these particular 7 actions or projects.
Councillor Corey.
Yeah, there was a comment earlier by a councillor about it has to fit into the budget, and I beg to differ, because I think this document here, and in any organization, the strategic plan will run your budget.
Yep.
It's not a sidebar to the budget. That's why you have to feel comfortable with what you have in it, because it's your guiding document for the next, from 2022 to 2027. But it's important that because I've been around the council table for a lot of years where that wasn't the case. We had this great document, but it always came back to the budget drove everything else, and so you never really attained anything that you had in your strategic plan, so there was no point having one. So I think the way this is set up, I mean, it looks like, so far it looks attainable. I mean, obviously there's bumps along the way, but it should drive the budget for the next X number of years, like in the infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree with that comment.
But I think because people have this false sense of understanding about strategic plans, and that it's just another document on a shelf, and that, well, it's not. It's what runs your organization for the next number of years. And the budget is one piece of it, not the underlying principle of everything. So I just have seen that happen so many times that and it doesn't have good results.
Do you have a bottle of water?
Beg your pardon?
Do you have a bottle of water?
I do. Thank you. Oh, you would like one?
Do you have one in your desk?
Any other questions on that?
I just, like those comments are very encouraging that, that's where the mindset is at, is like, this is the document. That's how these are made their most effective, when there's total buy-in. One other thing in terms of like acquiring resources to do things, right? Like this will help leverage funding through different levels of government and funds and grants that are available, right? Because we can link like specific projects back to it, right? Like maybe there's a funding opportunity to do a stormwater funding feasibility study from the province or whoever. This can help leverage that as well. But yeah, if there's no other questions on the infrastructure and environment side, I can flip to, and we can go back to any of these as needed. But the next one was tourism, economic growth, and development. And there's sort of like 3 goals, like 1A, 1B, 1C, and it's because they're so interrelated, and a lot of the actions like touch upon all 3 or multiple, so that's why they're labeled that way. But number 1A is promote new investment and development of city-held and private lands, so just general development. 1B, facilitate opportunities for more diverse housing development. Goal 1C, implement tourism initiatives to enhance visitor rates and experiences. And then the second goal, kind of separate, is support entrepreneurship and business development. So looking at the actions, and again, you can see like a lot of them kind of touch upon one of those first goals. So complete the detailed design for phase 1 of the harborfront. So that's McLeod Park and Husky to Muskie. So getting the engineering design work completed, which I think is already in process. The second one, divesting surplus city-owned lands as part of the vacant lands and growth strategy, right? So that project's in place, and it identifies all of the different city-held lands that could be surplus for different types of activities. So just implementing that and getting some of those properties sold. Again, stimulate development, bringing new revenue to the city. Complete the review of the official plan and zoning bylaw. Review existing and implement new community improvement plans. So I think there's, again, need to expand that program into new areas of the city, but also review the existing ones. Going back to Kyle's comment that, sometimes you've done supplementary plans or strategies that are like really the granular level of detail for some of these things. So like the 5-year tourism and economic development strategy, like that kind of hits on all three. It really is just saying like, let's work to activate it. Let's put it in action. We have it. So let's build off of it. And in 2027, let's initiate an update as it is a 5-year strategy. One underneath, identify opportunities to service land for new housing and commercial development. So think about like making strategic extensions to city utilities like water, wastewater, roads, for lands that really make sense, that can really, again, activate development. 1C, complete and implement the tourism destination marketing project, again, ongoing. And then the last one, which came specifically from the Northwest Business Center, was to update and implement their business plan. So there's sort of the plan of action, and again, you can see like on the input side, like tourism gets brought up quite a bit, tax-based diversification, surplus land development, housing being the number 2 ranked priority. And this is really focused, again, going back to your role. It's not saying the city's going to go in and build housing, but we're going to create the conditions for it to happen.
I don't think any of those would necessarily be surprises to council, save maybe for the last one, but it's getting to that time. Any thoughts around those?
Can I just ask a question about the city growth number 6, ranked community priority? What did that mean, the city growth? Like population growth, housing growth, economic development growth?
Just in general, seeing the city grow and develop, like expanding, whether it's new housing, new commercial development, new industrial development, like it's just in general wanting to see the city grow.
Okay, thank you.
So how does the last one, everything to date seems to have a major impact or potential. How does that last one, update and implement Northwest Business Center plan, how does that change?
Well, that's Adam. I don't know if you want to field that one, but I think the main goal there was just to support people looking to start local businesses and entrepreneurs. So that's really where the focus is there.
So do they have the ability to do that, and we're just not using their capacity, or they believe that they've got something to contribute and they want to be a bigger part of attaining that goal?
Yeah, in terms of the last one there, certainly I think it is about driving more integration between the Development Services Department and the Business Center, and a lot of and we already do have a great, I think working relationship between all the different staff members, but certainly I think there's an opportunity through the Business Center in providing those, and I think Allison's made the point before where generally the SBEX, or at least the Business Center itself for the region, is the primary provider of startup grants. So there's really not a whole lot of support for those entrepreneurs when they're looking at getting going, and I think that's a huge opportunity to leverage and look at different ways as a city we can kind of support that their operations, because it's so very much linked to economic development and growth.
Thank you.
Any other comments on focus area 2?
I think we're good to move on to.
Yep.
So for community well-being, recreation, and safety, so goal 1, deliver coordinated 4-season cultural and recreational infrastructure programs and events. And then the last, the 2 goal 2s, which are sort of interrelated or very interrelated, address community safety challenges and improve perceptions of safety in Kenora. And 2B, enhance emergency management, protective services, and social services provided by city partners. So again, going back to just, again, implementing good work that's been done and using this as a tool to strengthen that and reaffirm its importance. So again, completing the recommendations in the Kenora Parks and Rec Master Plan. From community services, they were very, passionate about, the second action, which is to develop an engaging suite of recreational and cultural programming events and activities. And through the strategic planning process, there was actually a lot of ideas being generated between community services, the arts center, the library, some of your cultural assets and how they can use each other to provide this. So that was pretty interesting to see. Complete an active transportation and trails plan. Going into the goal 2A, 2B, implement a downtown ambassadors pilot program, develop and adopt a community safety and well-being plan, review and update the city's emergency management plan, and develop a long-term fire department master plan. So again, these go back to setting the stage, for improving conditions in the future. Again, this one's really more planning focused. But again, these were things that were brought up as we need to do it. It's important. I don't know if there's any specific comments or questions about any of them, but happy to hear your thoughts.
I guess the one thing I would say is these are certainly achievable.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, going back to the theme of trying to keep it within feasibility and within the mandate of the city. So there were a lot of ideas from the community about we like to see this or that, but the cost was enormous and it wasn't within your mandate. So.
The last one, that was one that was introduced to us in the budget.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So we basically have to support this document because the SLT has already introduced a lot of these concepts into it.
For sure, some of them certainly, yep.
But they're really good action.
You kind of see the looks at this end of the room, Dan?
I like to think of it as you're hitting the ground running.
Well, yeah, it's not like, okay, we approve this and now we have to start the process and so we'll get through partway of 2022. It's going to lead us into 2022 and set us up for the future.
Very proactive.
I don't know if there's any, Kyle or anyone from SLT wants to build off the comment, but I think when we were going through this, there was a huge discussion on it's this is such an opportune time to again set that long-term direction today and make sure these frameworks are in place and these plans are in place. So I know sometimes the community is well, if we're always planning, when's action going to get done? But this is important work that can really help not just inform decision making, but it's at the end of the day, it's all about building towards the one idea. So I don't know if there's any other thoughts on that or.
No, I think that's a great point, and certainly some of the action was seen in the capital budget last week, and we're also going to have staff come in and present on the MAP projects next week, so you'll see some more of that action component, but it is a little bit of strengthening our foundations for that long-term success.
All right. Again, we can jump back to any of these areas as needed. So the next one, service delivery and organizational capacity. So looking within the city of Kenora, the three goals that came up were modernize city service provision to improve customer experiences, increase the capacity and capability of our workforce. So going back to Councillor's comments earlier about maybe it's just hires But how do we flesh that out? How do we know where those human resource gaps are? And then goal 3, enhance communication between the city and community on municipal services and affairs. So if you remember, like this really is like one, it's like building off strengths. Community was very like receptive, or again scored very high in this area, which is encouraging, but lots to build off of. The first one, developing and implementing defined levels of service. So again, you know, articulating exactly what the level of service is for each area, and using that, you know, as an accountability thing, but also a communication tool to the community and a way to measure. Undertaking a customer experience review. Leveraging technology to enhance customer experiences. So this is all about ways of like digitizing or making things more available electronically or online. Using city workforce data to support work planning for departments. Completing a compensation review for city staff. Creating a people management strategy. Develop and implement a performance development / feedback tool. Looking at more online blended learning and training platforms, and then for the third goal, creating a communication strategy and related protocols and processes. So just really defining like how the city is going to communicate with the community and making sure that proper processes are in place. So a lot of this came from like administration, HR, finance. You know, I think going back to the input we heard through the process, like, you know, modernizing services, you know, more transparency, better communication, even though the communication was deemed to be pretty strong, and just, again, looking at ways to innovate in how the city provides services and improving customer experiences.
So when we look at the goals, the fourth one, what exactly does that mean? Leverage city workforce.
Roberta's all over that one.
I anticipated that would be a lot of.
So this is really about enhancing our work planning process by leveraging some of the statistics we have, or some of the metrics we have. So for example, turnover rates. Maybe we're looking at attendance trends. We may be looking at overtime. So different metrics that tell us that we need to look at our workforce plans in a different way. So it's leveraging all the information that we already have today to be able to make better work planning decisions.
Thank you. So this is basically an area that we had a big gap in. Would that be fair to say that this isn't something we've really, when we look at all these involving staff and technology and, you know, the training program, it just seems the stronger staff we have, the better we are to attain our goals and to provide those services for the community.
Absolutely, and I think we're all seeing the impacts of some of the decisions that we're making on a day-to-day basis, right? So you get new technology maybe in a piece of equipment. Now you're using, we were talking about our sand spreader plow truck combo. You need one person instead of two. So how do you best maximize that other FTE? Where's there else in that same service that we could better use that individual? If we know areas have high turnover, and we're not using all of the position because we're spending lots of time in recruitment, well, maybe we make other decisions to ensure that we can sustain recruitment with still having a net impact of 0 to our budget, but having a better plan with our workforce. So it's you know, the conversations that we're all having at a senior leadership level around, you know, do we have not only the right skill sets, but the right composition, and how are we using those positions in the right way to make sure that we're able to deliver those services without impact. Could be as simple as seasonal to full-time. Could be something, you know, maybe we don't need, and maybe we have students that we have our student complement because it's a busy short period of time. So all of those discussions are happening with each leader in their area, and really creative suggestions and ways of looking at the work are happening all day long. So
Yeah, and I would say prior to my arrival, some really good decisions were made about, you know, investing in technology, and so we've had some data at our disposal that we're maybe not maximizing, and so it's kind of just trying to jump out of that. You know, we all get so tunnel vision on our work, right? Just stepping out for a little bit and really capitalizing on that data. We're paying for that platform, we're paying for that data. Let's sit down and try and figure out how we can best use it to be a little more efficient or a little bit stronger in our work. So, you know, a lot of this stuff was underway long before I got here, and so we're just trying to take it to the next level.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's to Kyle or Roberta. So would a lot of these supplement or take the place of an organizational review, or are some of these part of an like people management strategy? Is that part of a organizational review? Or, I've never heard people management strategy before, so I'm not sure I know exactly what that is.
Yeah, so it's really looking at all the things I just talked about. It's looking at our human resources and how we best use them. It's recruitment strategies. Is it an organizational review? No, we had one in 2015 that gave us some good nuggets, some things that were maybe not as helpful, but other things that really were helpful as we started to marinate on it. So, you know, leveraging the good work, the feedback that has already happened, how do we now put that into action? And so a people management strategy really pulls that all together and starts to look at our human resources in a way that is service focused.
Okay, just a supplementary question, because I'm a big believer in like organizational reviews. That's fine, it was done in 2015. I think it started to be implemented in the last term of council. Or,
Yeah, it was the first thing we dealt with when we came on council here.
You know, what's the magic, what's the sweet spot or magic number for doing one? Because you can't just do them every 50, because that's when you run into a lot of problems. And I'm just wondering if something along those lines need to be at the tail end of this 5-year strategic plan, like moving forward from that, because that's going to be almost 15 years.
Yeah.
And things have changed already dramatically, and I don't know what it's going to look like, you know, by 2027. So
For sure. I think it's important to recognize that when you get a plan, whether it's a master strategy or, you know, a review document, it takes time to really understand and be able to get your feet under you before you can actually maximize on the efficiencies or the opportunities that was outlined in the plan. So together, even though yes, it was 2015, if we were all here in 2015, maybe we would have moved faster together. But because you've had so many different players change out at the senior leadership level, you've had a number of other plans that have come forward. We have this strategic planning process underway. To undergo another organizational review right now would not be best use of our time or our dollars. We've got really great guiding principles here that are going to give us direction as we head into the next couple of years. The people plan will help ensure that everybody's able to deliver on those priorities. If we find gaps, similar to what we were talking about with planning, if that's identified as a gap, then how do we address those gaps? And senior leadership is committed to bringing those forward to council, to highlight those types of areas when it does affect people, and to bring forward an active plan. You're right, coming out of this, it may be time again for an organizational review, but I wouldn't suggest that one necessarily has a defined timeline in terms of a best practice.
And I would say the work never stops. You know, we're always chipping away at some of the things that you may or may not consider in an organizational review, and some of that is included here in the next 5 years.
Councillor Smith?
Yeah, going back to the survey and how high the city scored on communication and customer service, that's actually a reflection of the last strategic plan, because that's one thing that council and staff wanted to focus on. We heard from the community very strongly that they weren't getting good customer service, and we didn't have a communication plan really. So it's to the credit of Heather and her staff that we really moved forward, and people have noticed the difference. And I think that's what was reflected in the survey. So just continuing to do that good work.
Councillor Miller?
Yeah, just a short comment. The number 2, developing a people management strategy, and just start evolving that and linking it with organizational review. When that's implemented, to me, it would prevent doing an organizational review at a crisis. Because that's what often happens in organizations, is something happens where we automatically go in and do an organizational review, and we've already have a crisis in stage to attack. This will give you the lead up and the elements and the components that may lead to an organizational review or a modified one. So you'll have that data and that information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It helps us being flexible, where we can adapt and respond to the other drivers that are impacting the labor market today, right?
It's planning.
Good. Okay. So just moving on to the last two goals. So goal one, again, focusing on relations with treaty partners. So to partner with the Anishinaabe and other treaty partner peoples to advance reconciliation. And again, we may need to modify the words slightly just to be totally to accommodate some of the things that were brought forward by those communities and those partners. So that's the first goal. The second one is foster meaningful and beneficial relationships with those treaty partners. So one's looking more like within, like as a municipality, and one's looking more externally, like how do we build partnerships outside of the city as an organization. So this includes for goal one, creating Indigenous relations, inclusion and reconciliation strategy. Expand on awareness and training initiatives on truth and reconciliation. So again, that's providing those initiatives with, internally with staff. Leveraging city assets and facilities to support reconciliation. So again, cultural facilities, recreation facilities, like how can we use those to support reconciliation, activities or initiatives that promote that. For the second goal, creating policies or protocols for consulting treaty partners, so neighboring communities. And then develop the operating agreement for Tunnel Island. So, a lot of this, like especially these two goals, a lot of this will get flushed out through that first action. And this is really saying like that's where it starts, and figuring that whole piece out. But again, like the other actions are again other supplementary things that could happen. But really, it's going to be driven by that first action item. So I think this one, again, there still could be some tweaks and changes just to make sure that it's totally aligned, with leadership, council, staff, community, but it's also been worked quite a bit through this process. So I don't know if there's any other comments, especially with some of the G2G meetings that have happened over the last little bit, you feel maybe need to be brought forward to this specific focus area, but.
Councillor McNaught.
Short comment. I just think it's so valuable to have this in a strat plan. And looking at the history of our city going back years, to have this in here to me is very significant. I think it's a very positive action and goal.
And yeah, like something that came up at the council meeting that we had way earlier in the year was the need for this to be like a standalone area, like not to be integrated into some other focus area, but to stand by itself. So yeah, I really think it just shows its importance to the city.
Yeah, and I think the first one is you're right. It's the one that informs the process going forward. I think once you have that, it's much like the 5 and 10-year plans will inform the budget going forward. This will inform where we're going, because I can see right off the hop there's potential for all kinds of hiccups on line 2 or action to the bottom line, develop the operating agreement for Tunnel Island, and that has been fraught with danger. And I think having the Indigenous relations strategy is probably key to getting going on that. I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding, and I think that's key. It just informs the process.
Any other thoughts on this? And again, I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to provide their thoughts, because I know how important it is to the city. So maybe I'll just give another 30 seconds or so if anyone has any final comments. All right, so, okay, yeah. Oops. So originally we'd included, oops, go back to where I was. There it is. Originally, I was asked to maybe just allocate some time here. Like we've gone through the strategic plan, and that's essentially what's going to be included in the document, again, with all like the preamble and like the introductory text and stuff. But I also wanted to give some time today, just in case, if there were any other, specific topics related to the strat plan, or like maybe they're longer term community priorities or council priorities that haven't been discussed yet, but just give sort of an open platform to talk about some of like, the initiatives or projects or things happening that maybe weren't included in what we went through that are important that we should discuss. So I also don't know, Kyle, like how you want to facilitate this, or if it's more of just sort of a free-for-all.
Well, I think just how I would frame it is just, is there anything that you don't see represented in the draft that we've just gone through that you'd like to talk about? Or, do you feel like we've more or less been able to sort of hit the sweet spot on a lot of those issues? Or is there anything that's glaringly missing? Or just wanted to give you an opportunity to really have that opportunity to get your final thoughts, and if we've missed something, I'd just like to hear it so we can take the time to get it right before it comes before council for approval.
I think the overarching goals are all there for me. I'm already drilling down and seeing some other ideas, but I think that those are just things that come from that process. Like.
And if we want to drill down into the action items, happy to do that. I can tell you right now, the group and I feel comfortable that we can deliver on everything in there. So, depending on what other actions or projects council would like to focus on, that's just what we would like to discuss right now. I'm happy to consider anything that council has.
When I look at it, I think we all recognize what the priorities are within the community. And the community is aligned with how the majority of council, we recognize the same priorities. So you've set out a pathway on how you're gonna, as a city, how we can address those. You've set in a framework that the SLT is comfortable with. Not only are these the priorities, but you've given us a pathway on how we can achieve this, and we believe we can achieve this. So I really don't see, at least personally, where I want to deviate from what's presented to us today.
I mean, we're flexible. We're willing to hear it and listen and work with council on anything that they want. This is just after a lot of time and energy and trying to listen to council, to staff, to members of the public. This is sort of where we've landed. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but happy to hear any suggestions that council has, or if there's anything that they think that we should be spending some significant time on over the next 5 years.
Maybe to add to that, if there's anything, because like one of the next phases is trying to break this out over a 5-year time frame. Like, what's the timing and phasing going to be of these initiatives? Like, if there's anything that we've gone through, or like, I feel like that's something we need to do as soon as possible, or that's more of on the immediate priority side too. We can also have that conversation, or we can take in that feedback as well.
And we don't always get an opportunity to sit down with council and really hear what your longer term vision or ideas are, right? And sometimes council too, right? You're reacting to the issues of the day and the things that members of the public are bringing to you. And so just wanted to provide that platform for council to be able to talk about any exciting ideas that you might have, or you've heard from members of the public that we might be interested in kicking the tires on here today. And it's not to say that anything that doesn't end up in the plan is going to be excluded over the next 5 years. It's just, this is really trying to provide sort of those railway tracks for us to stay centered on.
Yeah, and then that gives us an opportunity to drill down on those issues. Like, we're talking about community safety, and there's a convergence between community safety and housing, and it's also a conversion with the CIP, because we really need to pedestrianize our downtown so that, and have more people living downtown. So that's, again, that's a drill down process from there. So I'm comfortable with that. I like the overarching ideas, and it leaves us plenty of room to when we start talking about the CIP and things, we can start to talk about those ideas. But this gives us a really solid framework that we can hang some of our ideas on. And I think you'll start to see more and fresher ideas come out of council with something like this as a plan in front of us.
I'm comfortable with this plan. I think that it's achievable. I think we're addressing the issues that we're hearing in the community and what we've heard from the community. And I think that it's almost a continuation of a lot of the good work that we've been doing over the past few years. So, yeah, I'm happy with it for sure.
So where do we go from here, Pat?
Dan, where?
I mean, if we're all good with this, and just having that open forum, again, we can always go back to it.
I can maybe give Councillor McMillan a chance. He just stepped out really quick.
Sorry.
Just if there's anything, Councillor McMillan, that you felt was missing or that we haven't had an opportunity to discuss, just wanted to give council an opportunity to give us any ideas they had, just for us to take back before we bring this forward for approval in January.
You think I would be brave enough to bring something up at this point?
Well, no, that's what the process is for.
I'm kidding, Kyle. I'm content with what's been brought forward. I think it's very progressive.
Councillor?
Right, so, yeah, I'm very comfortable, great process, great document that I've seen. But I'll be interested in seeing, as you referred to drilling down and then, putting deliverables and measurables on there, and, that's what I would like to see next.
We need to sit down as a senior leadership team and talk more about this, but we envision providing regular reporting back to council and back to members of the public on this. So this will be something that we'll be touching. You'll be getting frequent updates on this throughout the year. We haven't figured out exactly what those intervals are yet, and we haven't figured out what the reporting will look like, but that's something we're going to work through, and we'll probably be aided by Dan's efforts with the departmental planning with each department. So we'll get to that step, and so stay tuned for that.
So is that, it seemed before we did things on an annual basis, and it would be long after the fact, which I don't think really is beneficial. But at the same time, we don't want to have a reporting process that's onerous, that, spending so much time to get us quarterly reports. So I just think if you can find.
Yeah. Try and find the middle, and that's just, that's why I want to have the conversation with SLT, and we've just been so focused on getting the plan adopted that we haven't really focused on the reporting aspect yet. But I hear you. We'll try and come up with something that's not too onerous on the team, but gives council and the public information that they need.
So, yeah, because the question was asked. So over the next couple weeks and into the early new year, really what I'm hearing is we have some consensus that we're pretty good with what's been shown today, which is essentially like what will make the plan. So over the next few weeks, it's about developing a revised draft strategic plan and starting to format it and make it look presentable to the community. And again, one of the things we really wanted to make this document is a strong communication tool to the community. So essentially any community member can pick it up and understand, okay, this is generally what the plan is, I get it. So we're going to be reviewing that back and forth with SLT, but should have that done, in the early to mid new year. We're then hoping to do sort of a final community review, which is just maybe an open house if COVID conditions permit, just to give the community one last chance to see the plan before we submit it in January for the adoption process. And as Kyle was mentioning, the next step for this is work planning. So we have the list of projects that we know we want to do in the next 5 years. What the department work plans do is they take those projects and they really go into a granular level, what is the phasing? Is this like a Q1 in 2022, or is this like we're hoping to initiate it by Q4 2027? Who's the department, or even sometimes like the manager that's responsible for driving it in implementation, but also who are the supports? Like, is it an effort between, community services and development services, and who are those, individuals that can support that? What might the budgets be? And it's, like similar to like budget plan. Like, we can't get like exact amounts for some projects, but we can establish ranges to help plan, for your own budgeting cycle. Funding programs that might be available. And then again, going back to some of those measurables, like what does success in this look like? Like for a lot of them, it's just like, we've completed the plan. But for some others, we implemented a plan, to this degree. So it's going to take this strat plan and make it really granular. So staffs have sort of a step-by-step guide to implement it. And again, it's good to have that clear path. It also helps if there is turnover at a manager or below level. So we're going to do that. And then finally, like the final piece is we're going to create what we call placemats. So they're 11 by 17 graphical summaries of the strategic plan, which outline like everything, like, our vision, our mission, our values, our focus areas, the different actions that we want to, implement over the next 5 years. And it's like on one poster that every staff member and members of council will have. So again, it's front and center. Ideally, we say just, put it on your desk or tack it above your computer monitor, and just making sure that the strat plan is always front and present. So those are the next steps. Again, we're really at the end, but it's been a really good process, I think. A lot of back and forth, a lot of like heavy lifting from your staff here, especially those in this room and a few that have been missing. So that's all I had for today's presentation. I think we still have quite a bit of time, so I'm happy to sit here as long as possible, answer questions, discuss anything that you need to discuss. Other than that, I'm appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today.
So Dan, when you talk about the placemats, is that all part of the target of January 11th coming to Cal? Like, and given the fact that...
You think you'll have the placemats ready?
I mean, if we're good with this, like it's basically just taking this and putting it on a placemat, so that can happen pretty quickly. We could have it for the 11th.
I guess my question is, given what's left to do,
Right.
is the Christmas holiday season, is that realistic, or is getting pushed back to February, and will it make a difference if it's pushed back a month? I just don't want to leave here today thinking we're going to get something.
Sure. Yeah. I don't.
Is it realistic for the targets you set?
Dan and I will probably connect after. I don't have a perfect answer for that. Happy to hear that we could maybe have the placemats ready. Wasn't necessarily expecting that. So I think I just need to have a conversation with Dan around the community engagement and just see if that's still a reasonable target for us. But to answer the last question, it wouldn't be the end of the world if this gets pushed to February. I just think recognizing that we're getting late in council term and recognizing that the team really wants to get digging in on some things, that's really where we're at. And we thought sort of new year, fresh start. So, okay. But we'll make sure that we take the time to get it right.
Any questions, Council? Councillor Smith, you must have something you'd like to
No, I do
contribute.
not. This is a first.
She'll keep us here for 8 hours.
You should talk, buddy.
Okay, sorry I introduced that. So, Dan, are we good then, or?
If you're good, I'm good.
It would appear to be.
Yep.
And it would appear that the SLT they've put a lot of time and effort in that, including with their staff. So, personally, I find it exciting. So, so do we need to say we're adjourned, or do we? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, team.